Alright guys, welcome back to JSR Garage, and I'm real sorry that I haven't been, well, filming any more of this than I am doing right now. But we have gotten these two engines. This is the 1.6 and this is the 2 liter, ready to be, well, swapped around. This 2 liter is going into that Taunus, right there. And so far what we have done, we have gotten brand new spark plugs in this thing. Gone over the points, replaced the cap, distributor cap, with the one that was on the 1.6. We have moved the pulleys around, so we got the ones from the 1.6 onto the 2 liter. Blocked off one of those outlets on the intake. Throttle cable, valve stem oil seals, and engine mounts moved over, as well as probably some few other small things like the heater element sitting right here. Move that over from that one because they had two different setups, and we'll need it to match the car. Yes, Escort. I'll come back to that later in a different video. Working on transmissions, we can't seem to get a yoke to fit the 5-speed, so we might gonna have to end up putting another 4-speed in it, because that one is not usable. That one is a goner. All the sprockets are completely mushed in there, so you can't really use that one. So they're out looking for a new one. Well, not a new one, another one in the parts bin. Of course, radiator has been cleaned through, so has the heater core, and if you remember, quite a while back, oh yeah, no seats in the Escort, seats are out here, they're going in the Taunus. If you remember, quite a while ago, Jeep Diesel was here that ended up being scrapped, and I pulled the electric fan out of it. So that has been mounted in the Taunus right now, and we've gotten a thermal switch and all the things we need to make that work, so this car ain't gonna overheat again. So what we'll need to do now is pretty much ready to drop the engine in, but we're gonna have to make sure we have a transmission to work. So now let's see if we can get that 2 liter dropped into that Taunus. So we've gotten the Taunus back inside. Spent a lot of back and forth on this thing lately because we've kind of had a slight issue with the transmission. Now down in the pit there is the old 4-speed and clutch housing, bell housing, that we couldn't get to fit onto this transmission, because on the old 4-speed the bolts are in here instead of out on these tiny little pegs. And of course, also being a 1600 transmission, the 4-speed has a smaller yoke, an output shaft, which meant we had to go search for yokes and drive shafts, trying to look at whatever could fit. So I mean, this is a Granada drive shaft from the green parts car I had, with a big yoke, but it doesn't have one of these rubber discs. And this is the original Taunus drive shaft. That's another Taunus drive shaft that had the right yoke, but when you check that out, of course, the ears on the yoke to attach it to the rubber disc are wider out on the 2 liter drive shaft than on the 1600 drive shaft. So we're looking around to see what we can find and make out of that. Of course, you got the hood popped. The 2 liter has been dropped in here with its Weber, what was it? Well, it's a 3236 Weber, so it's on here now and in here. We haven't really attached anything. I've threaded the accelerator cable through the firewall. I've attached nuts on the engine mounts, and of course the fan's in. The original fan is off the engine. So when we get a transmission in here and get this actually working, we can get the exhaust up, bolt the engine down, and then start fiddling with all the rest. You know, getting Radiator in, all the wiring done, hoses, clamps, water, attached to fan, and all that. So next you'll see is this thing a bit further on. We right now have pretty much completed the engine swap on the Taunus. Now, as you can see, the 2-liter is inside and all of the wiring has been done. Car now runs. There is a mixture of water and citrus acid in the block, well, in in the entire engine really, to try to clean it out, to try to get all the crap out of it. We ended up getting the 5-speed into it. It took a while, had to get some parts. Cross member didn't fit from the 4-speed to the 5-speed, and that took some finagling. Had to modify a Capri cross member to get it to fit. But now, of course, the 5-speed is in here. Have reverse there, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And it's a runner. I don't know if there's a battery in this thing. I didn't check. Sounds like it. Let's see if it starts. Almost. Yeah, so this 1600 Taunus now has a 2-liter in it and a 5-speed, which is going to be a vast improvement on pretty much everything. Instead of having 71 horsepower of 1.6 liter, well, I wouldn't say Fury, it now has 100 of 2-liter Fury. Of course, if you watched Engine Masters on Motor Trend On Demand, or in fact the videos they have on YouTube, they showed how much horsepower you lost with regular fans, and this one had a viscous, well, clutch fan that robbed about 14 horsepower, which we removed off of this engine to make it all electric, which in theory means we should have about 114, 115 horsepower out of this 2-liter. Now that's the same as you got on pretty much the Sierras, but the Sierras were heavier than this, so this thing just might be a nice little fast car now. And with a 5-speed, it's most likely not going to drink as much fuel because of that last overdrive gear. So let's see how this thing does. Alright, so the Taunus has had its interior put back in, and blue lights in the dash. It looks real good. Now this is too dark to see anything, I guess, but for how you can see it with your bare eyes, this is pretty good looking. So the car has been put mostly back together. We'll just turn the ignition back off. So yeah, the Taunus is back together. It is, well, pretty much back together. We test drove it a little bit the other day. Found the temperature to rise a little bit too high for what we liked. Now the electric fan does cool the bottom of the radiator very well, but the top doesn't have any shroud on it, so it blows a lot of air straight up, which we're probably going to have to make some kind of a shroud over there just to keep the air going into the radiator instead of blowing straight up. They put the old clutch fan back onto it just to make sure it has enough cooling. I don't think that fan is going to do anything with that huge pusher fan ahead of the radiator, but probably does something. The accelerator pump on the carburetor ended up having a leak when they first got it started. They took that out and looked over it, and this is my dad and my brother looking at it at this point. Then thought it was back together. You made a new seal for it and also used some silicone just to get it attached. Then, in trying to give it a tune-up yesterday, of course had a vacuum gauge on one of the vacuum ports on the Weber and tried to tune it up to have the most vacuum on idle, get the idle down to somewhere reasonable because it was way high. Ended up finding out that the main shaft in the carburetor is really worn, so you can lift it up and down. That varies the revs, and you can also force it back when it's at the cable says it's idle. When you let the accelerator pedal out, you can still force the blades back shut, so it doesn't shut all the way, which gives it a bit of a high idle. Probably would need another carburetor to that engine, or just, you know, maybe rebuild. But I don't know if there is anything to fix that up and down slack. It might be the shaft, and it might be the carburetor housing itself, which, well, I don't know. But yeah, that is back together. Just a bunch of small stuff left to do. Of course, the clutch release bearing is noisy. We didn't know when we put it in, because I had to buy a new bell housing for it because it didn't fit. The old 4-speed one didn't fit on the 5-speed, so I had to get a new one. And with that, they also got the clutch fork and the bearing. This is all used parts, of course, and we didn't know anything about the bearing, so we just put it in. Ends up having to take it back out and put the old one that was on the 4-speed back in, because we know that's quiet and it fits the same part. So that is it for the Taunus for this time. We're going to get back to it when it's on the road, probably when it's painted, because it's going to get painted before it leaves here. So we'll be back with that later. You can like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I look forward to seeing you later.